Glacia Prime. Even the name sent shivers through the alien scientists, an icy whisper that hinted at the planet's harsh, unforgiving nature. The planet orbited a dim star in an isolated region of the galaxy, its surface cloaked in blinding white ice, broken only by jagged, towering glaciers and the deep blue shadows that traced their edges. Temperatures here plunged so far below freezing that most creatures would perish in seconds, and yet, rumor had it that the galaxy's so-called Deathworlders, humans, were eager to explore it. The alien research vessel floated in orbit, packed with scientists from the temperate planet of Xiran. The Xiranians' delicate physiology thrived in warm, stable climates, where the idea of cold was merely a gentle, temperate breeze. They had never known true cold, nor had they seen creatures who lived comfortably in it. So, for them, Glacia Prime was like something out of a nightmare, an inhospitable expanse of frozen wasteland where nothing should exist, let alone function. The aliens had set up observation posts and deployed drones to monitor the planet's surface, trying to learn what they could without setting foot on the treacherous ice. The crew gathered in the main observatory, eyes wide as the human ship made its descent. The humans, wrapped in thermal suits and equipped with formidable technology, moved with a calm efficiency that seemed utterly bizarre to their alien counterparts. Instead of treating the planet as a deadly adversary, the humans appeared almost excited. They wore expressions of awe and curiosity, pointing to the crystalline snowfields and marveling at the twisted ice formations. One of them even chuckled as he stepped onto the frozen ground, commenting how it reminded him of a brisk winter back on Earth. The Xiranians exchanged uneasy glances. For them, the surface of Glacia Prime represented a death sentence, a place where even their thoughts seemed to freeze. And yet these Deathworlders treated it like a playground. A small contingent of Xiranian scientists watched closely as the humans unloaded their equipment. Thermal tents, generators, and heated storage pods were quickly set up, but there was no sign of urgency or panic. The humans chatted and laughed, speaking of layering up, as though the planet's deadly chill was nothing more than a cool breeze. One Xiranian scientist, Dr. Lyran, stared at the screen, watching the humans with growing bewilderment. He tapped a clawed finger against his console, accessing data on human physiology. It made no sense. How could these creatures, who shared no biological adaptations for cold, walk about in such casual disregard for their surroundings? He studied their body temperatures, noting they had to rely on external gear to survive. And yet not one of them seemed distressed or even mildly concerned. The Xiranians had learned a strange phrase from their observations of human culture. A minor annoyance. It cropped up in their literature and conversations whenever humans spoke of facing difficult situations with resilience. Cold, in particular, seemed to fall into this category. Humans from colder regions on their own world had a peculiar relationship with it, treating snowstorms and blizzards as part of daily life. To the Xiranians, the idea of enduring such conditions willingly, of even thriving in them, was unfathomable. It left the aliens feeling a mix of amazement and apprehension. As the humans settled in, Lyran initiated a recording. He muttered a note into his log, his voice betraying the awe he felt. The humans, they describe the conditions here as a minor annoyance. I do not believe this is an exaggeration. They seem to view Glacia Prime as a challenge rather than a threat. What manner of beings treat an environment like this with such indifference? He glanced around at his colleagues, each one of them transfixed by the live footage of the humans below. The Xiranians had seen Deathworlders before, had witnessed their famed resilience, but nothing like this. One human pulled off a glove briefly to adjust a sensor, his skin exposed to the planet's air for a moment too long. Lyran winced, expecting frostbite or worse, but the human just chuckled, redonning his glove without a second thought, casually commenting on the brisk atmosphere. A growing sense of unease rippled through the alien researchers. Their scanners showed the planet's temperature at levels that would have spelled an instant and painful death for them. Yet here were humans, engaging in routine tasks with an almost reckless enthusiasm. One of the human team members looked directly at a nearby Xiranian observation drone, saluted it with a grin, and went back to setting up his equipment. In that moment, Dr. Lyran realized what unnerved him most about the Deathworlders. It wasn't merely their technology or their physiology, but their attitude. Glacia Prime, a world that seemed to defy life itself, was little more than an intriguing puzzle to them. It was like they held some secret knowledge, something embedded deep within their minds and hearts that allowed them to treat life-threatening environments with a casual nonchalance. The Xyranians had spent months studying this planet, carefully planning for any encounter with its cold. They wore thick, heated suits even within their ship's climate-controlled observation deck, their physiology unsuited to anything below temperate warmth. But these humans, as Lyran noted in his log, barely seemed to notice the cold. For them, it was just a part of the environment to adapt to, a mere minor annoyance. The humans continued to move about the frozen terrain, setting up devices, collecting samples, and marking points on their maps, their breaths fogging in the icy air. Every laugh, every casual conversation, every gesture that spoke of familiarity with such an alien environment made Lyran and his colleagues question what they understood about survival and adaptation. What Lyran couldn't shake was this fundamental question: what made humans so different? Their physiology alone didn't explain it. It had to be something more, some intangible quality that enabled them to adapt to the most hostile places with ease. And as he watched, transfixed by these curious, indomitable beings, he couldn't help but wonder if the humans saw Glacia Prime in the same way he and his people viewed a balmy summer's day. Perhaps that was the true essence of being a Deathworlder. The humans, minor annoyance, had just begun to reshape everything the Xyranians thought they knew. The humans had only been on Glacia Prime a few hours before they set off across the terrain, venturing deeper into the icy wilderness without hesitation. Each step crunched through thick layers of snow and frost, their boots making sharp impressions in the ground. From above, Xyranian drones recorded every move, transmitting the footage to the alien research team huddled in the warmth of their observation vessel. The Xyranians leaned forward, expecting to see signs of struggle, or at the very least some caution. But what they saw baffled them. The humans strode confidently across the frozen landscape, with seemingly no regard for the treacherous conditions. They moved with purpose, stopping occasionally to scan their surroundings, exchanging casual words that were surprisingly light-hearted. The aliens watched as one human laughed, throwing a snowball at his companion, who responded with a cheerful grin. Such playfulness in the face of certain death left the Xyranians speechless. It was as if these creatures were not only unafraid of the cold but relished in it. Their gear was equally mystifying. The Xyranians had expected bulky, cumbersome suits to shield them from the cold, yet the humans' equipment seemed both advanced and streamlined. Their suits, dark and fitted, appeared to hum with a faint glow, indicating some internal heating system. As the Xyranians zoomed in on the footage, they could see vents along the wrists and necklines, maintaining a consistent warmth within. They noted the thick, layered gloves that allowed dexterity without sacrificing insulation, and the cleats on the humans' boots that gave them a sure grip on the ice. But what amazed the aliens most was how the humans seemed completely unfazed by the chill. Their breath puffed visibly in the frigid air, but none of them showed any discomfort. The aliens observed them removing their gloves briefly to adjust equipment, laughing about the brisk atmosphere, as if they were on a mild outing rather than an expedition on one of the coldest planets they'd ever studied. One of the Xyranians, incredulous, translated a snippet of overheard conversation in which a human remarked, "It's just like a winter morning back home, but prettier." The scientist stared at the translation, unable to comprehend the casual reference to conditions he'd considered deadly. Confusion gave way to something more profound. The Xyranian scientists started analyzing the humans' biological data in real time, looking for clues as to how they could withstand such cold. The humans' body temperatures were steady, unaffected by the extreme chill. This raised uncomfortable questions. Were these creatures naturally adapted to cold environments, perhaps even immune to them? Lyran, the lead Xyranian researcher, voiced the thought aloud. Perhaps they have some form of natural resistance? He theorized, only to be met with silence as his colleagues grappled with the implications. It was unlikely, considering their original planet was classified as a temperate death world. not an ice-covered one. The drones continued to record as the humans pressed on. They trekked over frozen lakes and up steep, icy inclines, demonstrating a physical stamina that seemed almost boundless. They maintained an easy pace, pausing occasionally to examine geological formations or drill for samples, their demeanor unwavering. The aliens were used to seeing creatures struggle on Glacier Prime. Even their own experimental robots had failed after hours of exposure. But here, the humans showed not the slightest sign of slowing down. Curiosity among the Xeranian scientists intensified. They needed answers, and they needed to understand what made the humans so different. Lyran set up a dedicated monitoring system to track human vitals and collect as much data as possible. Other scientists debated potential hypotheses, proposing that humans might have metabolic or psychological mechanisms that allowed them to adapt, though none of them could pinpoint precisely how this adaptation might work. Each moment the humans stayed out on the ice added more questions to the list. To the Xeranians, cold was a signal of danger, an environment to avoid. Their warm, humid homeworld was a stark contrast to this frozen wasteland, and they could hardly imagine enduring it. Yet here were the humans, adjusting their helmets, shrugging off the occasional blast of icy wind as though it were a light breeze. In their astonishment, they began to doubt their own understanding of life and endurance. The Xeranians had previously thought themselves wise, understanding the known galaxy's habitable zones and uninhabitable wastelands. Yet, faced with humans who saw a death trap as merely a bit chilly, their confidence wavered. A few of the scientists, captivated by what they saw, began to discuss reaching out to the humans to ask questions directly, seeking to understand their perspective. They reasoned that there had to be some explanation for the humans' resilience, some factor that eluded their analysis. Perhaps these humans could share knowledge on how they adapted to their homeworld's challenges and even thrived on a planet that others would avoid at all costs. The idea that such an inhospitable place could be manageable, almost enjoyable, to another species was thrilling and deeply unsettling. Meanwhile, the humans continued with their expedition, oblivious to the intense scrutiny from above. They moved through the landscape like explorers on an afternoon hike, still joking, still laughing, finding fascination in every ice crystal and snow drift. They seemed genuinely happy to be there, and even as temperatures dropped further, they only adjusted a few settings on their suits and carried on. For the Xeranians, it was a paradigm shift. They'd begun the day expecting to observe cautious, tentative creatures who would retreat at the first sign of real cold. Instead, they watched beings who seemed to defy every expectation, treating life-threatening conditions as little more than an interesting quirk of the environment. The footage and data they were collecting would change the way they thought about survival and adaptation for years to come. In silence, the Xeranians recorded every detail, capturing this impossible resilience with reverence and awe. To the humans, it was just another day on a cold planet. To the Xeranians, it was nothing short of miraculous. The Xeranian monitoring team was the first to detect the storm. A colossal ice front sweeping across Glacier Prime with winds fierce enough to freeze unprotected machinery solid in seconds. The Xeranian lead scientist, Lyran, felt a pang of dread as he watched the data spike on his console. This was not an ordinary blizzard, even by Glacier Prime standards. The temperature was plummeting even further, wind speeds were dangerously high, and visibility was quickly dropping to near zero. Conditions were about to become a perfect storm, lethal to any creature caught in its path. Lyran quickly activated the communication channel to the humans, his voice tense as he advised them to retreat immediately. "A storm is incoming, far more intense than anything previously recorded here. You must evacuate at once," he said, expecting immediate compliance. To his shock, the humans barely reacted. Instead of the urgency he'd anticipated, they merely exchanged glances and nods, their expressions as calm as if they'd been told to expect light rain. After a quick discussion, one of them replied, "Thanks for the warning, but no need to worry. We'll just hunker down until it passes." The Xeranians watched in disbelief as the humans began to gather nearby materials, setting up a makeshift shelter with what seemed like casual precision. They dragged heavy tarps over snow mounds and secured them with spikes, creating a windbreak, while one human drove stakes into the ground, fortifying their tent against the upcoming gale. Their movements were practiced, methodical, showing no hint of panic, no scramble to escape. Inside the Xeranian vessel, a stunned silence took over. Lyron exchanged looks with his colleagues, trying to process what he was seeing. "Are they staying?" one of them whispered, incredulous. "That storm will freeze through any structure in minutes." They recalculated the severity of the incoming storm, certain that the humans hadn't fully understood the danger. But again, all scans and readings confirmed it. These humans were, indeed, staying put. They had set up their shelter, and, against all logic, settled in as though preparing for a quiet evening. The temperature outside was now well past survivable limits for most known species, with winds capable of battering even reinforced machinery. Yet, the humans carried on without a trace of concern, joking and casually securing their shelter as if preparing for nothing more severe than a camping trip. Lyron felt his own anxiety growing. He turned to his assistant. "Perhaps they underestimate the conditions. We should intervene. This storm could end their mission or worse." But the assistant's face reflected the same bewildered awe. "They don't seem concerned, sir. They're laughing." As the first waves of the storm hit, the wind whipped against the humans' shelter, yet they remained composed, huddled inside, protected by their rudimentary setup. The Xyranians watched in growing alarm as temperatures dropped further, reaching a level where the air itself seemed to crystallize, visibility reduced to swirling, violent white. The storm was so intense that their own sensors struggled to keep up, the readings fluctuating in real time. And yet, there inside the fragile tent, the humans simply adjusted their hoods, settled in, and continued their conversations, as if the howling blizzard was no more than background noise. Inside the tent, the humans checked their equipment, made small talk, and shared stories about even worse storms they'd faced in places like Siberia and Antarctica. One of them laughed about a trip to Earth's Arctic, describing how that storm came out of nowhere, dropped a solid foot of snow in minutes. The aliens listened in disbelief. How could they be making jokes in the middle of a catastrophic storm? From the aliens' perspective, this was a fight for survival, yet the humans treated it like a minor inconvenience, something hardly worth stressing over. With every passing minute, the Xyranians' anxiety grew. Several scientists argued over whether to deploy emergency assistance, some insisting that the humans' behavior was a sign of ignorance, others claiming it was an intentional show of resilience. "They can't possibly survive this without serious damage to their equipment, or worse," one scientist murmured, nervously monitoring the humans' vital signs. Yet all readings showed stable heart rates, normal oxygen levels, and no signs of distress. The Xyranians watched as the humans adjusted their thermal layers, drank hot beverages, and even laughed as the winds howled outside, tearing at the fabric of their tent. The Xyranians couldn't take their eyes off the monitors. They zoomed in, searching for any sign of struggle or fear, any indication that the humans might be on the verge of retreat. But there was none. The humans displayed nothing but camaraderie and ease, even as the temperatures plummeted further. One of the humans cracked a joke about a walk in the park, as the wind shook their tent, eliciting laughter from his teammates. Their nonchalance in the face of such conditions was both mystifying and terrifying. The storm raged on for hours, and with each passing minute, the Xyranians' amazement grew. The humans showed no signs of faltering, maintaining a steady stream of banter that seemed to fill the storm-battered silence. Lyron finally slumped back in his seat, shaking his head in wonder. "I don't understand. How can they be so calm?" One of his colleagues leaned forward, still captivated by the live footage. "Perhaps, to them, this truly is just a minor annoyance. Maybe this is what it means to be a Deathworlder." Finally, as the storm began to abate, the winds easing and the temperatures creeping back to less catastrophic levels, the humans emerged from their tent, stretching and dusting snow off their shoulders. They spoke cheerfully, inspecting their shelter and gear, seemingly unfazed by the hours they just spent in life-threatening cold. They carried on as if nothing unusual had happened, discussing the next phase of their mission and reviewing the samples they'd collected earlier. There wasn't a single complaint or mention of the storm's intensity. Inside the observation vessel, the Xyranians were left grappling with a mixture of awe, confusion, and respect. These humans, whom they'd assumed would struggle and possibly retreat, had faced one of Glacia Prime's most brutal storms with little more than mild discomfort. The aliens were beginning to realize that, to these Deathworlders, even the most hostile environments held little terror. Watching the humans resume their work, Lyran found himself humbled. For the humans, Glacia Prime's worst storm was nothing but another obstacle to adapt to and overcome. After the storm, the Xyranians were eager to analyze every scrap of data they had gathered. The humans' survival in conditions that would have obliterated most species left the entire team in a state of awe. Lyran, still processing the events, was the first to initiate a detailed analysis of the humans' physiology. "We need to understand how they are capable of enduring such extremes," he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. They began by analyzing the humans' vital signs during the storm. What they saw was astonishing. Unlike the fragile species from their own planet, which would have succumbed to the bitter cold in minutes, the humans' internal temperatures remained stable throughout the storm. Even more puzzling, their metabolic rates showed no signs of the strain they had expected. Instead, the humans' bodies seemed to be functioning normally, unaffected by the extreme conditions. The Xyranians ran the data repeatedly, searching for any anomaly that could explain this resilience. But there was none. The humans had adapted in a way that baffled the aliens. Lyran couldn't help but wonder, how had they evolved to handle such extremes? The Xyranians had long believed that survival on a death world was a matter of having the right resources, advanced technology, strong biological traits, and protective gear. But the humans had something deeper, something that went beyond survival. It was as if their very biology was prepared for extreme conditions. The team began to study Earth's history, looking for clues. They found records of places on Earth where humans thrived in some of the harshest environments imaginable: Antarctica, Siberia, high-altitude regions where oxygen was scarce and temperatures could plummet to deadly lows. What they learned was both humbling and enlightening. Humans didn't just survive these conditions, they had made them their homes. They had established research stations in Antarctica, built thriving communities in sub-zero temperatures, and had even sent explorers to the highest peaks of the Himalayas and Andes. One of the Xyranian scientists, Callan, read about the endurance of humans in the Arctic Circle. "They have developed entire cultures around surviving extreme cold," he said, voice tinged with disbelief. "They even harness the power of fire, creating tools and shelter to protect themselves from nature's wrath." The idea that a species could not only survive, but also thrive, in such a hostile environment began to sink in. They had assumed that only those who were naturally born for such extremes could survive, but humans had proven that ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience could overcome nearly any obstacle. As the Xyranians continued their research, their view of humans began to shift. They were no longer just curious specimens, they were beings who could survive against nearly insurmountable odds. The Xyranians began calling them Deathworlders, a term that had previously only applied to planets like Glacia Prime, where the environment itself was a constant challenge to life. But the humans, as the Xyranians now realized, were Deathworlders in their own right, not because their planet was inhospitable, but because they had learned to adapt to every environment, no matter how deadly. Lyran sat back, contemplating the implications. In the wake of the storm, he realized how limited his own species' understanding of survival truly was. "We have never faced such adversity," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "Not even in the most dangerous parts of our world could we endure what these humans endure." The Xyranians, a species accustomed to moderate climates, were not built for extreme cold. Their biology couldn't withstand the temperatures that humans took in stride. Even with their advanced technology, it was clear that the Xyranians would not have survived the ice storm on Glacia Prime without suffering significant damage. For the first time, Lyran understood the depth of human resilience. The Xyranians had always prided themselves on their intellect, their ability to master their environment with technology. But the humans didn't just rely on their technology, they used it in conjunction with their mental and physical fortitude to overcome challenges that would break most other species. The Xyranians had believed their species was the pinnacle of adaptability, but the humans had proven otherwise. As the days passed, more of the Xyranian team members began to reflect on the humans' resilience. They were struck by the humans' mental fortitude as much as by their physical endurance. Where the Xyranians would have retreated in fear, the humans had advanced with confidence and camaraderie. They didn't simply endure hardship, they found joy in it. Their sense of humor, their unwavering determination, and their ability to keep pushing forward in the face of impossible odds left the Xyranians in awe. Callan, who had been particularly interested in human psychology, made a note of this. They faced dangers that would send most beings into a panic, and yet they remain calm. They do not buckle under pressure. Instead, they make jokes, they bond with each other, and they move forward. It is as if adversity is nothing more than a challenge to them, not something to fear. Lyran felt a pang of envy at the human ability to adapt with such ease. It was a stark contrast to his own species' instinctive desire for safety and control. The Xyranians had built their society to avoid risk, to safeguard themselves from every possible danger. But the humans seemed to thrive on risk, constantly seeking out challenges and overcoming them. In their history, the humans had faced wars, natural disasters, and environmental extremes, yet they never stopped fighting. Their ability to adapt, to use their minds and bodies together, was something Lyran couldn't help but admire. With time, the Xyranians began to speak of the humans not just with curiosity, but with a deep respect. "They are more than survivors," Callan said, with a hint of reverence in his voice. "They are conquerors of their own world. The way they endure, adapt, and even thrive, there is something magnificent about them." As Lyran reflected on the humans' resilience, he realized how much they had to learn from them. Humans had demonstrated something the Xyranians had never fully understood. Survival was not just about having the right tools or the right technology. It was about having the mindset to overcome any obstacle, no matter how insurmountable it seemed. And in that realization, the Xyranians found something they had never anticipated: a profound respect for the humans. The human team had completed their mission on Glacia Prime. They had traversed the planet's treacherous icy wastelands, faced brutal storms, and withstood temperatures that would have decimated almost any other species. Yet, when it was time to leave, they packed up their gear with ease, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. They had not just survived, they had thrived in conditions that even the Xyranians had initially feared. The alien scientists had watched in awe as the humans dismantled their shelter, loaded their equipment, and prepared to return to their ship. Despite the relentless challenges of Glacia Prime, the humans seemed to have no fear of the planet's icy grip. One of the humans, in his usual cheerful manner, turned to the Xyranians as they prepared to board their craft. "Thanks for the hospitality," he said, smiling. "We'll be back next year for a real winter vacation, huh?" His tone was light, his face full of easy confidence, as though the dangers of the frozen world were nothing more than a mild inconvenience. The other humans laughed and waved goodbye. As they boarded their transport, one of them tossed something over to the Xyranians, a thermal glove, a piece of their gear. On it, in bold letters, was the phrase, "Just a little chilly." It was a simple, humorous gesture, but to the Xyranians, it was a mark of the humans' unshakable spirit. The glove was left as a token of their time on the icy world, a reminder of how, to the humans, Glacia Prime was no more than a minor obstacle, nothing to be feared. As the human ship ascended into the sky, leaving Glacia Prime behind, the Xyranians remained standing on the frozen surface. They were no longer filled with anxiety or confusion, but with a newfound respect for the Deathworlders they had observed. The planet seemed quieter now, almost peaceful, as the storm that had battered it subsided. Yet, the Xyranians felt a deep sense of awe. They had watched these humans face down challenges that would have crippled their own species, yet the humans had taken it all in stride. To the Xyranians, it was a humbling realization. Lyran, the lead scientist, stood still for a long moment, the thermal glove still in his hand. He marveled at the message inscribed on it. The phrase was simple, but it encapsulated everything the humans had shown them. It was a joke, a light-hearted comment, yet it carried an undeniable weight. The humans had faced cold that could freeze the air itself, winds that could shatter bones, yet they had treated it as if it were nothing more than a passing inconvenience. They had faced the planet's dangers without fear, without hesitation. And now, they were leaving, as casually as if they had spent the day in a mild breeze. The Xyranians, who had once believed that only the most perfectly adapted species could survive on a death world, were now forced to confront the truth. The human strength was not solely in their bodies or their technology, but in their minds. It was their mental resilience that set them apart. The Xyranians had their own remarkable abilities, their own advantages, but the humans had something far deeper, an inner strength, an unyielding drive to endure, to adapt, and to overcome. The humans did not just survive, they conquered adversity, transforming the impossible into something trivial, something they could laugh at and move beyond. One of the alien scientists, Callan, turned to Lyran. "How is it possible?" he asked. "How can they be so unbothered by what would destroy us? We would have perished in that storm within minutes." Lyran held the glove, reflecting on the human's resilience. "We believed we were the apex of adaptability," he said slowly. "But we were wrong. It's not just about physical endurance or advanced tools. It's about the mindset, the ability to face the impossible and still move forward. These humans, they are something entirely different." Callan nodded, his expression one of quiet admiration. "We've underestimated them. We thought we understood survival, but they've shown us that true strength is not measured by how long you can endure a harsh world, it's about how you perceive the world itself. They make the impossible seem trivial." Lyran took a deep breath, the weight of his reflection settling in. "They are a unique species," he mused. "Not because of their physical form, but because of their mental resilience. They have the ability to make adversity seem insignificant. It's something we, as a species, cannot even fathom." As they stood in silence, the vast, cold landscape of Glacia Prime spread out before them. The Xyranians, so accustomed to their own technological mastery, now realized that there was a force far greater than technology alone, the human spirit. The humans had left a mark on them, not just through their survival but through their incredible mindset, which allowed them to conquer any challenge with humor and unwavering resolve. The final realization came slowly but surely. The Xyranians had been watching to understand how humans could survive a death world, but in the end, they had discovered something far more profound. The true nature of humanity lay not in their physical strength or their tools, but in their ability to adapt mentally and emotionally to whatever challenge the universe threw at them. The Xyranians had witnessed something far more remarkable than they had ever anticipated, a species that could turn the most hostile environment into nothing more than a passing annoyance. As the Xyranians made their preparations to leave Glacia Prime, the thermal glove remained in Lyran's hand. It was a memento, yes, but more than that, it was a symbol. A symbol of how the humans, the Deathworlders, had taught them a lesson they would never forget. And with that realization, the Xyranians left Glacia Prime behind, humbled and in awe of a species that could face down the coldest, most unforgiving world and still call it just a little chilly.